Hello, my name's Marina. At my own birthday party, my mother smashed a cake into my face and called me a pathetic loser in front of everyone. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing it had all been planned, that the humiliation, the missing inheritance, the erased photos, they weren't accidents. They were orchestrated betrayals. Have you ever sat quietly at your own family table only to realize you were never really invited? What would you do if your family celebrated your erasure like it was a tradition? Before we go any further, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing how far this little story can travel. Let's make this space feel a little more connected, no matter how many miles are between us. When I pulled up to the house in Brookhaven, I already knew something felt off. The driveway was fuller than usual, and the porch was lit up like a winter gala. My name wasn't anywhere on the welcome sign. Instead, the banner stretched across the living room read, "To our brightest light, Alira," my sister's name. My birthday. I stepped inside, the scent of rosemary and roast chicken mingling with floral perfume and hairspray. The fireplace crackled like always, and the house, that grand old thing with its dark stained wood and silent portraits, hadn't changed a bit. But the energy was different. All eyes were on her. Alira, in a satin emerald blouse, stood under the chandelier accepting compliments with that polished laugh of hers. "We're just so proud of her," someone clapped. I recognized the voice, Aunt Vivian, who hadn't called me in years. Another guest leaned in and said, "What a remarkable woman. That recent award, amazing work." I swallowed the ache before it reached my eyes. I drifted through the crowd, people barely nodding in my direction. My mother, Sylvia, brushed past me holding a wine glass, gave me a peck on the cheek, and said, "Don't stand around looking lost, Marina. Mingle. It's a celebration." "Of what?" I asked, forcing a laugh. "Don't start," she whispered through a tight smile before walking away. I ended up near the dessert table, the one spot no one seemed interested in yet. There were cupcakes, tiramisu, and a large sheet cake with piped roses in golden script. I leaned closer. No name. Not mine, not anyone's. Just family first. Even the cake had decided I didn't exist. I tried to catch Dad's eye from across the room. Harold stood with 3 of his old law buddies sipping scotch. When he saw me, he gave a short nod, as if to say, "Yes, yes, you're here. Now go blend in." For a moment, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. Maybe they just wanted to do something neutral. Maybe a shared event felt more diplomatic. That illusion broke when a guest tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You must be so proud of your sister tonight. This is huge." I blinked. "Right. Very proud," I said, my voice catching. The camera flash went off. I turned to find myself alone in the shot, standing by a punch bowl while Alira posed with a group at the fireplace. That photograph, I realized, would live somewhere without me even being part of the moment. The MC, Alira's friend from grad school, called for a toast. "Let's take a moment to recognize what this family is built on: excellence, dedication, and, of course, our shining star." Alira stepped forward, modest as ever, and did the wavy hand of humility bit. My fingers clenched around my glass. My breath hitched, but I forced myself forward. I walked toward the mic, cleared my throat gently. If I could just say something. I never finished. My father, Harold, strode up beside me and took the mic from my hands like it was a mistake I'd even held it. "Let's keep the spotlight where it belongs tonight," he said, patting my shoulder in that way that feels more like dismissal than support. The room chuckled. Even applauded. I stood there frozen, the flush creeping up my neck. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just walked back to my seat, each step heavier than the last. I stayed for 20 more minutes, pretended to laugh at 2 more forced conversations, then slipped out the side door. The cold outside bit at my cheeks, the sharp air making everything feel realer than I wanted. Inside, I could still hear the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the joy not meant for me. I looked up at the stars, my breath hanging in the air. I had come back to feel like I belonged. Instead, I became invisible all over again. I returned to my seat like a ghost, invisible and cold in a room packed with people pretending to celebrate. Every smile now felt like a sneer. The laughter sounded distant, unreal, like a TV left on in the background of someone else's party. My hands gripped the edge of the chair too tightly, as if anchoring myself would make the shame sting less. No one looked at me. Not really. A few nodded politely. Some avoided my eyes. Alira leaned into her husband, whispered something that made him snort into his wine glass. She glanced my way, caught my gaze for half a second, then turned away as if I were a speck of lint on the evening's polished surface. I had been humiliated, sure. But for the first time, the fog cleared. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't wondering if I'd misunderstood or overreacted. I had been erased. Intentionally. Sylvia clinked a fork against a glass and stood up. Before dessert, we've got a little gift for our birthday girl, she announced, her voice sweet and slippery. We all put our heads together and got you something special. The room shuffled with interest. I felt every eye shift toward me. My stomach tightened. I didn't want anything from them. Not after that toast. Not after that silence. A small wrapped package made its way into my hands, passed down like a hot potato from one relative to the next. I unfolded the gold paper slowly, hoping somehow it was just a necklace. Maybe earrings. Something safe. Surface level. Instead, I pulled out a book. The title punched harder than any slap, Rebuilding When Your Life Falls Apart, a practical guide to becoming someone worth loving. There was a beat of quiet, then a few light chuckles. One uncle gave a low whistle. "That's some tough love," he said. Harold nodded solemnly, like he approved of the intervention. It's a powerful read. Changed a lot of lives. My throat dried. I tried to swallow. I forced a smile even as my fingers began to tremble. "Wow," I said, my voice like cracked porcelain. "So thoughtful." Sylvia grinned, taking it as gratitude. "We figured it might give you some direction, sweetheart. Everyone's rooting for you." The condescension dripped like syrup over rotten fruit. I stared at the cover, a watercolor of a woman climbing out of a ditch. The woman didn't look like me. She looked like who they wanted me to become, meek, broken, grateful. Then Alira appeared with a flourish, holding a cake like it was the Olympic torch. "Let's sweeten the mood," she chirped, placing it in front of me. My favorite carrot cake, or so she claimed. The icing read nothing. No name. No candles. Just orange swirls on white. It looked like it had been sitting in the fridge all week. She beamed. "Let's hope this helps you sweeten up a bit." I gave a tight smile. "Wow. Touching." Sylvia leaned in behind her, muttering under her breath. "You should be grateful you even got a party this year." I looked up at her slowly. "A party for your golden child. Not me." Her face changed just for a second. The mask slipped. She reached forward, grabbed the cake with both hands, and slammed it into my face. Gasps echoed like sirens. The dish underneath cracked against my cheekbone. The frosting hit my eyes, my mouth, my hair. The smell of artificial spice and cream cheese frosting choked me. I couldn't see clearly, but I heard the voices. Oh my God, did she really? She deserved it. I tasted blood. My nose had caught the edge of the ceramic. No one moved. No one offered a napkin. My father, from across the room, looked at me and shook his head. "You always ruin everything," he muttered. Frosting dripped down my blouse. My breath came fast, short. I didn't cry. Not a tear. I stood slowly, reached into my purse, and pulled out my phone. I took a photo of my face. Just one. Eyes red. Mouth bleeding. Frosting melting across my skin. Then I turned and walked out. The cold air outside felt cleaner than anything in that room. My fingers were still sticky. My face burned. The picture stared back at me from my screen. Awful and perfect. That was the moment I knew I wasn't going back inside. Not tonight. Not ever. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't speak either. The silence wasn't deliberate. It just spread through me like fog, curling around every thought and choking it quiet. By the time I stepped into my apartment, the frosting had hardened against my cheeks. I didn't bother to clean it right away. I sat on the edge of my couch holding my phone, staring at the photo I'd taken, the one with cake smashed across my face, red at the nostril, disbelief etched into every line of my expression. I don't know why I didn't delete it. But I didn't. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, hollow. Like someone had scraped the sound right out of the walls. No calls. No texts. I checked my voicemail. Nothing from Sylvia. Nothing from Harold. Nothing from Alira. Just silence. An intentional one. I scrolled through photos of the night. Not mine, but the ones already circulating online. Alira's social media was buzzing. What a magical night, one caption read. Another photo showed her surrounded by guests, smiling like she'd just won an election. I wasn't in any of them. I lingered on one image, her speech at the mic. I remembered the moment. The one where she had looked directly at me and said, with the warmth of a preschool teacher, "Marina's always had a big heart, even if she's not as driven as some of us." I hadn't flinched when she said it. I even smiled. Maybe back then it felt like a compliment wrapped in charm. Now it felt like a knife dipped in honey. And I'd clapped too, hadn't I? Like a fool. I shut my phone off. The next day I opened Facebook. I shouldn't have, but I did. I scrolled to the family group, the Callahans. It had been our little space for years. Holiday planning, recipe swaps, baby photos. I clicked. Error, group not found. I searched again. That's when I saw it, real family. The banner was a collage of smiles. Alira in the center, Sylvia with her arm looped around her, Harold in the back, glass raised. It was from that night. The night I got caked like a circus act. The posts were full of inside jokes. So proud to celebrate what really matters. Family is earned, not just inherited. Someone even commented, "Such a classy evening." Some people just don't get it. My chest clenched. Not from anger, but from confirmation. I hadn't imagined anything. I wasn't welcome. They hadn't just hurt me. They'd archived me. I didn't comment. I didn't message anyone. I logged off. That night, I opened a blank email. I started to write to Sylvia. I thought maybe I could still reach her before things went too far. "Mom, I'm not writing for an apology. I just wanted to say I noticed all of it, and it hurt. I didn't expect you to stand up for me that night, but I didn't expect you to join the crowd either. Maybe it's silly, but I always thought you saw me, even when you didn't say it. I guess I just wanted to matter to you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I saved the draft and closed the laptop. Outside, snow began to fall, soft as ash. I stood by the window, arms wrapped around myself, watching the flakes drift past the street lamp. I used to think silence kept me safe. Now I know it just makes me invisible. The snow hadn't melted for days. Brookhaven was draped in white, quiet and cold, the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, just empty. I'd barely left my apartment since that night. My world had contracted to the living room, a couch I no longer trusted, and the hum of a fridge that somehow made everything lonelier. Then the email came. No sender name. No subject. Just one line, "For your eyes only." I hesitated. Scams. Spam. Virus bait. I knew better. But curiosity, it cuts sharper than caution. I clicked. The video was grainy, the kind of footage someone records thinking it's a joke. The audio crackled, but the voices were unmistakable. Sylvia and Alira's. They were in the kitchen, laughing, mixing icing. "She needs a public lesson," Sylvia said, cool as anything. "She's had it too easy emotionally." Alira snorted. "It's not my fault she sulks instead of stepping up." Sylvia again, quieter, "We'll remind her where she stands tonight." I paused the clip, rewound it, played it again. My chest burned. They'd planned it. The cake. The crowd. The humiliation. It wasn't an outburst. It was theater. And I was the punchline. I opened a drawer and pulled out a small box with a brass key tucked in a corner. Delina had given it to me years ago. "If anything ever feels wrong," she'd said, "check this first." I hadn't thought of it in months. The safety deposit box was at a local credit union. I drove through slush and wind, parked in a near-empty lot, and walked in with purpose. The clerk recognized me, nodded quietly, and handed me the key back after retrieving the box. Inside was a folder wrapped in a faded blue ribbon. I brought it home. Before I even opened it, the first thing I saw was her handwriting. To Marina, in case silence is louder than words. Inside, copies of the original property deed. The house. The land. All of it under my name. The second page, a certified legal document, notarized and dated 3 years ago. I sat there, papers spread on the coffee table, staring at names that told a story I was never meant to hear. I pulled up the county clerk website, typed in the parcel number. Current deed holder, Alira Callahan. Last change, 3 months ago. No record of my name. They hadn't just thrown cake. They'd erased me legally, behind closed doors, before they did it publicly. My thoughts raced. Every birthday gift that never showed up. The scholarship rejection that came without explanation. The college savings Grandma had promised, but that Sylvia said was used up early. It all aligned. A pattern of theft disguised as oversight. They didn't just ignore me. They rerouted everything I might have built. And for what? So Alira could shine brighter. So Sylvia could keep her picture-perfect holiday cards unmarred. I stood and paced back and forth, the video still open on my laptop, paused on Sylvia's smirk. They wanted me small. Manageable. Quiet. They wanted me gone, but smiling. I lined up every document on the table. Deed. Will. Copy. Video file. Screenshots. Not for revenge. Not yet. But for visibility. They want to erase me, I said aloud to no one. Fine. But not before they remember what it feels like to be seen. 3 days passed before I texted him. We need to talk. Alone. He didn't reply right away. Harold was never one to respond on emotion. He liked to let things settle, as if his silence somehow lent gravity. But he answered the next morning. Meet me at Old Creek Cafe. Noon. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat near the back window, where the late December sun struggled to melt the frost off the glass. He walked in exactly on time. No hug. No warm smile. Just a nod, like we were two people negotiating a contract neither of us really wanted to honor. He ordered tea, no sugar, like always. I didn't order anything. I suppose you've come to air your grievances, he said flatly, setting his coat across the back of the chair. No, I replied. I came for truth. He gave a chuckle, almost amused. Let's not blow this out of proportion, Marina. Families disagree. That's normal. I stared at him. Is that what you think this is? Harold folded his hands. You were upset. Fine. But dragging legal documents into this? It's unnecessary. We can still fix this by pretending it didn't happen. He leaned forward. If you let this go, we can move forward as a family. No courtrooms. No more drama. There it was. The strategy. Not remorse. Not understanding. Just a calculated move to preserve the image. You're not sorry, I said, not asking. You're worried I'll make you look bad. He didn't deny it. Just shifted in his seat and said, Alira has earned everything she has. Don't take this out on her. I laughed. Bitter and quiet. I came here hoping for honesty. You brought terms. When he didn't respond, I stood. I'll see myself out. I left the cafe and didn't look back. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. Clarity had a way of making even anger feel precise. I drove to the house. Not to talk. Just to collect the last of my things. No one was home. Sylvia's car was gone, and the house sat still under the weight of its silence. I stepped inside. The smell of furniture polish and faint vanilla still clinging to the air. My room was exactly as I'd left it, untouched and unloved. I packed a few books, a photo album, my high school ring. As I passed through the hallway, I stopped by the photo wall. It had changed. A photo that once showed the three of us, Alira, our younger brother Jamie, and me in the center, had been reprinted. Now it was just the two of them, their arms around each other. My spot between them cropped out as if I'd never stood there. I pulled the frame from the wall. The new print hadn't even been resized properly. Just chopped and recentered like an afterthought. I checked the next frame. Same. Another one. Our childhood Christmas photo. They had literally folded me out, my red sweater cut off mid-arm. They didn't just forget me. They deleted me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked back to my room, pulled a printout of the original deed, the one with my name, and slid it into one of the empty frames. The glass clicked softly into place. I returned it to the wall. I didn't leave a note. They'd made it clear I didn't belong in the photos. But the law didn't care about holiday cards or family loyalty. You erased me from the pictures, I said aloud, alone in the hallway. Let's see you erase the law. 1 week after I left that house, I found myself sitting across from a lawyer named Meredith Rothman in a brick office near Pearl Street. Her walls were lined with degrees and family photos. She looked like someone who fought for people who never got the benefit of the doubt. I handed her a folder containing the altered deed, Grandma Delphine's letter, and copies of the will. She read in silence, lips pressed tight, flipping through each page slowly. Finally, she sat them down and looked at me. They don't just owe you money, she said calmly. They broke the law. Her voice wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. I felt it settle into my bones like a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. She explained the process, how we'd need to file a cease and desist, draft an affidavit, gather formal documentation. I nodded through it all. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. That night, I read Delina's letter again. To my Marina, whose strength no one sees, but I've always known. She'd written it with a pen that left just enough pressure to show conviction without anger. Her words wrapped around me like a hand on the shoulder. I leave you this home not because of tradition, but because you never took more than you gave. I didn't know I needed that line until I read it, not just to justify my claim, but to remind me that I hadn't imagined my place in that family. She had seen me. I placed the letter in a new frame and put it by my bed. It didn't erase anything, but it anchored me. By the end of the week, the paperwork was done. Meredith drafted the letter, clear, professional, merciless. It stated plainly that I was the rightful heir per the original will, that any transfer of ownership was invalid and unlawful, and that if the issue wasn't remedied, legal action would follow without further notice. I signed it without hesitation. We sent it certified mail, one to my parents' house, one directly to Alira's firm. Then I printed copies of the documentation, placed them in a folder, and labeled it with a single word, truth. The Callahan family's annual Christmas dinner was in 3 days. They always held it in the church hall my grandfather helped build. Neutral ground, they said. For unity. I wasn't going for unity. I planned every detail. What I would say, when I would say it, how I would hand out the documents. There wouldn't be a scene. No raised voices. Just paper. And truth. They tried to bury me in silence. I was answering with documentation. The night before the dinner, I sat at my kitchen table and went through the files one last time. Deed. Will. Letter. County records. Copies of the email with the video link. Screenshots of Alira and Sylvia laughing as they prepared the humiliation. Each item a nail in the coffin of their narrative. I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel excited. Just ready. That night, I slept more deeply than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up, dressed simply in navy slacks and a charcoal coat, and drove to the church hall. Snow was falling again. Gentle. Steady. Quiet. My boots crunched along the sidewalk as I approached the door. From inside, I could already hear the clatter of silverware and the lilting chords of some carol playing over the speakers. I paused outside the door, clutched the folder to my chest. They told their story, I whispered. Now they'll hear mine. With evidence. The parking lot was already half full when I pulled up. A few kids chased each other near the entry ramp, their laughter rising above the wind. Inside the church hall, the buzz of conversation filtered through the glass doors. Cheerful. Polished. Blissfully unaware. I stepped in alone, clutching a plain black folder in one hand and a framed letter in the other. The smell of cinnamon cider hit me first. Then the sharp crackle of laughter from across the room. Heads turned when I entered, not all, but enough. Some smiled tight-lipped. Others glanced away. A few whispered to their spouses. Elira was in the center of it all, wrapped in a velvet green dress that looked like it came with its own spotlight. She clinked her glass, welcomed guests, and gestured toward the buffet like a pageant hostess. "Family is everything," she said to a group of cousins who all nodded like bobbleheads. I sat in the back corner, folding the folder into my lap. I didn't eat. I didn't mingle. I waited. They dimmed the lights for the slideshow. Our legacy, Elira called it. Photos played across a makeshift screen: birthdays, graduations, weddings. My cousins, my brother, Elira at every milestone, always in focus. If I appeared at all, it was as a background blur or not at all. Someone behind me whispered, "I thought she wasn't coming this year." Another voice said, "Brave showing up after all that." I didn't respond. I just held the folder tighter. When the lights came back on, Harold raised his glass. "Tonight," he said, "we honor tradition. We honor loyalty." And that's when I stood. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't ask for permission. I walked to the center of the room and faced them. "I'd like to say something," I said, calm and clear. A few people glanced around nervously. Elira's eyes narrowed. "I brought some things," I continued, opening the folder. "Not for revenge. For clarity." I handed out copies, one to each table. "This is a notarized will, handwritten by Grandma Delphine, naming me as the sole heir to the house. This," I tapped another page, "is a public record showing that deed was changed 3 months ago without my consent. And this," I held up a final sheet, "is a transcript of a video sent to me anonymously, in which my mother and sister discuss humiliating me at my own birthday." Sylvia went pale. Elira laughed too loudly. "That's ridiculous," she said, waving her hand. "This is just melodrama." "No," I said. "This is proof." For 5 years I gave. I stayed quiet. I played my part. Harold stood slowly. "This isn't the place for this kind of spectacle." I met his eyes. "It's the perfect place. This is where you hosted the Erasure." I thought it only fair I return the truth in the same space. Silence fell like a dropped dish. My Aunt Martha took one of the copies, scanned it, then stood and walked out without a word. Sylvia clutched the tablecloth. Harold's jaw twitched. Elira still smiled, but her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her wine. I walked to the piano and placed Delina's framed letter on top, facing out. "You wanted me quiet," I said softly. "Now you can listen to my absence." And then I turned and walked away. The morning after the Christmas dinner, my phone lit up before sunrise. Missed calls, voicemails, message requests, emails. Nearly all from people who had sat there smiling while I spoke, only to stab in writing what they didn't dare say aloud the night before. Not one said, "I'm sorry." Most danced around the word entirely. Sylvia wrote, "You've embarrassed us." Harold's message simply read, "You've crossed a line you can't uncross." Elira didn't write at all. But she didn't need to. I didn't open the attachments. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I deleted every message without blinking. Truth creates noise. Silence never saved me. By noon, I was sitting across from Meredith again, this time in her conference room, where the air smelled like carpet cleaner and resolve. We went over the final letter line by line, comma by comma. Every sentence was crafted for clarity, not vengeance. The letter was firm, direct, precise. It demanded the restoration of the original deed. It included notarized copies of the will, the property transfer timeline, and the legal violations involved. "If this is ignored," Meredith said, "we file." I nodded once and signed. We sent it electronically and by certified mail. 2 envelopes, one to my parents' address, the other to Elira's firm. No preamble. No pleasantries. The subject line was enough. Notice of legal claim regarding estate dispute. Marina Callahan versus Sylvia, Harold, and Elira Callahan. "This isn't revenge," I wrote in my accompanying note. "It's reparation." Later that afternoon, the fallout began. Sylvia left a voicemail calling me cruel, delusional, poisoned by jealousy. She finished with, "You've destroyed this family." For what? I didn't reply. Alira took to Facebook. A black and white photo of her and Sylvia laughing on a porch. Captioned, "Nothing hurts more than betrayal from within." Dozens of comments flooded in support, outrage, backhanded pity. A few of my cousins, the ones who always stayed quiet, messaged me privately. One wrote, "I always wondered why you disappeared from the photos." Another said, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up." Funny how many knew and said nothing until I said everything. That night, I stood in front of the bookshelf in my apartment. There was a photo frame still hanging me, Alira, Jamie, and our parents. It was from a vacation in Maine when I was 13. I pulled it down and stared at it for a while. Then I slid the photo out, placed it in a drawer, and replaced it with Delina's letter. Her words were framed now, visible every time I walked past. I didn't feel triumphant, just clear. I started journaling that evening. Not to vent. Not to immortalize anger. But to record. To remind myself what silence let fester, and what truth finally cut loose. If they call this war, I wrote in my first entry, so be it. I call it freedom. The next morning, an envelope slid under my door. No return address. Inside was a letter, typed, double-spaced, firm, from Harold's lawyer. They were contesting the claim. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just threat dressed as civility. They drew the first line. Now they wanted to redraw the battlefield. The first week of January settled over Brookhaven like a soft breath, snow blanketing rooftops and ice painting windows in quiet patterns. I hadn't left my apartment in 5 days. Not because I was hiding, but because for the first time in years, I felt no need to run from myself. The noise had stopped. No calls. No new emails. The Callahan family group chat had gone dark. The legal back and forth had slowed after my attorney's final notice. My world wasn't peaceful, but it had found a rhythm that no longer depended on anyone else's approval. I cleaned the apartment, not in the frantic way people clean when they're avoiding something. This was different. I wiped shelves, organized paperwork, lit a candle, not to mask anything, but to enjoy something. My place didn't feel like exile anymore. It felt like mine. That's when I found the package. It had slipped behind a row of books on the bottom shelf. A small brown parcel sealed with thick tape, my name written in the elegant looping script I hadn't seen in years. Delina's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, wrapped in faded tissue, was a silk scarf. Deep blue with gold thread. My initials stitched into one corner. Tucked beneath it was a folded note. For when you're ready to be seen for who you truly are. No flourish. No sermon. Just Delina's quiet assurance, still guiding me even now. I didn't cry. I held it close, breathed in the scent that had somehow survived time, lavender, old paper, maybe even a trace of the cedar drawer she always used. My reflection in the window looked different that day. Not stronger. Just clearer. A few hours later, an unexpected email pinged into my inbox. Subject, saw you. The sender's name rang a bell, Miss Tilden, my 5th grade teacher. She wrote, "I saw your story. I saw what they tried to do. And I wanted to say, you were always the one holding the whole thing together. I remember, even if others chose not to." I stared at the message, hands hovering over the keyboard, then typed. "Thank you. That means more than you know." And it did. Later that evening, I placed the scarf in a frame next to Delina's letter. Beneath it, I pinned a printout of Ms. Tilden's email. Together, they formed something that felt closer to family than any Christmas card I'd ever received. I no longer hoped for a reunion. I no longer waited for apologies. I didn't need them to undo what was done. I'd already reclaimed what mattered, my voice, my dignity, my space. You don't need to win family back when you've already reclaimed yourself. The next morning, I made coffee and stepped onto the porch. The air was sharp, the kind that made your lungs tighten. Across the street, a neighbor waved. I waved back. I wasn't alone. I just wasn't surrounded by those who erased me. I sat down with my warm mug and watched the snowfall. No camera. No audience. Just me. They called me a loser. Turns out, I just stopped playing their game. They say silence protects you. But I've learned that silence, when weaponized by others, becomes the loudest form of betrayal. This story, my story, wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering that I matter, even when those closest to me tried to erase that truth. That truth. And if you're going through something like this, share your story. You never know who it might reach or how much strength someone else might find in your words. And if you're still in the middle of it, hold on gently. Be kind to yourself. Even in the hardest seasons, you are already building the strength that will carry you into something better. Healing doesn't happen all at once, but every small step is proof that you are finding your way.